Hey, folks, welcome to another Mañana No Mas podcast. It was a whirlwind 2025, and our first interview for 2026 is another referral from the famous Noemi. If you want to know more about Noemi, we just interviewed her at the end of 2025. In any case, I've got Vanessa Thompson with me. Couldn't be happier to have another quality guest on the show. Vanessa is a graduate from Berkeley. She has interviewed people on her own podcast that are much more famous than the names you've seen in the listing on my podcast. So it'll be interesting for us to share some screen time together and go over a couple of things. But people that she has interviewed, like Venus Williams, Philip Hoare, Lisa Fernandez from Innovation Accenture. I mean, you go through this list of people, and there's just really fun people that really pop off the screen. And she's got some really great topics that we can get into. So I encourage you to stick around for the whole show. With that, I want to go ahead and invite Vanessa. Vanessa, just go ahead and share yourself with the listeners and viewers. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. My work kind of stems around innovation, finance, and culture. How do we build organizations that are innovative, lean, and efficient? And do that in the way that kind of inspires a vision or impact for that organization as well, too. So I kind of first started off in clean tech or biofuels. I worked for a NASA-based biofuel startup back in the early days and worked with them for some time. And then I worked at the Nature Conservancy, the World Bank, and the UN Foundation, all in different roles. I learned a lot from those larger organizations. I also worked in much smaller organizations, some lean startups. I worked for one eVTOL company, if people know it. It's electric helicopters, essentially, is the equivalent. All sorts of different startups that I worked at, and then venture capital as well, too. And through that experience, kind of growing up in Silicon Valley and then working in a lot of different startups, I became really curious about what makes an innovative organization. What are the kind of key traits that make an organization innovative, that make a culture innovative? And so that's kind of what led into a lot of the things that you talked about, like the podcasts and books and all things like that, is really just kind of answering that core question.
I'm going to hit you with something that's going to sound sideways, and I apologize if it sounds overly sideways. But you dropped the keyword about 10 times right there. And it's one of those words that I think nobody really can put their thumb on. They like to use it, but they really don't know what it means. And that's that word innovative. Like, because everyone likes to say, oh, we're innovative. We're being creative,
Right.
innovative. We're not staying in the box. We're not sticking pins in it. We're moving forward. But like, a rising tide rises all ships. Like, we say all these things.
Right.
What does it mean? When you say innovative, describe to me what you're actually describing.
Yeah, there's a lot of key ways to measure it. There's a lot of metrics that you can look at, and each organization is going to have a different one depending on their specific goals. You can be looking at something like how much IP are we developing, per kind of every 3 years. You can look at it, a lot of companies actually measure it based on what percentage of our revenue is based on new products that have come into the market. So we want to refresh that revenue stream coming in, for example. So if you have product A, and that's 80% of your revenue, you might set a goal that in 5 years, 60% comes from a completely new revenue stream, right? So that's one way to measure innovation. But at its core, you're really looking at how can I reach the customer pain points in a new way and generate a new stream of revenue from that. So that's kind of really at its core what it is how do you answer your client, your customers' pain points really deeply, but in a completely new avenue than you've done before. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can think about it, and that's unique to every organization, whether we're working within, an AI lean startup or we're looking at a huge nonprofit, right? They're going to measure innovation in completely different ways. But at its core, you're really thinking about who is my client, what are their pain points, and how do I serve them better in a new way that I've done before?
This is going to sound really self-serving, but I literally just made lesson content about those subjects today.
Oh, wow. Great.
We're launching an apprenticeship program out of our agency to teach other agencies how to, launch a successful agency, which sounds like a lot of repetitive words. But the main thing was like, know who your client is, know who their clients are. How do you identify pain points, and then how do you create a user experience that's in alignment with the end users, intuition for how a website should work. Like a lot of people come to the web space that I'm in and they always want to like reinvent the internet or something, and they always want to use your term, we're looking for something innovative, something that sizzles and pops. And you're like,
Hmm.
well, the last time you went to Apple, did that website sizzle and pop? Like it's a very plain website, or Amazon or any of these major sites. When you actually try to, break them down, they're very simple in their design and their elegance because it allows users to kind of go in and find that space, right? And a lot of new people to business, I think they overthink it. They want to be super, they want to be special, they want to be over the top. And unfortunately, I think that's the opposite of what the consumer's actually looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And there's this kind of famous old school case study that I think a lot of MBA programs use, which is there was this shower company that sold faucets and different shower systems, and they wanted to become more high tech. This was about like 15 years ago or so. And so they decided to put a remote in and have you could like change the water temperature from the other room or something like that because they wanted to include all of this new technology that was coming out that they were available to. But that wasn't exactly serving the customer pain point, right? That wasn't exactly serving what the customer needed at that time. So I think that a lot of people think that, yeah, like you said, innovation is something that's always using what's new or what's glamorous at that time within the industry. The reality is it's about necessarily really focusing on what the customer needs and really putting that first and foremost. It might actually be even more about simplicity, like you said, like having a more simplistic website design so that that UI is really compelling to your client, right? It might actually be about reducing the number of features to make sure that it's really serving the client's best interests. And I think that's something I see with all of the case studies that are in my book, or a lot of the people that come on my podcast as well too. A lot of these key innovators, they're really great at listening to their clients. They're really great at truly and deeply understanding who it is that they're talking to. Each of these ones that have become, really successful in whatever kind of field that they're looking at. The book I have, it has 60 case studies of innovative people and executives. And I really like to go off of case studies, what's really happened and what's really changed things. And every single person that's in those case studies, the way they moved the needle was by deeply listening to who it is that they're serving.
You touch on something really interesting there, and I don't want people to miss this, especially in the startup space. Um, I talk to people all the time that want to do online courses or membership websites or whatever. And we talk about you need to listen to take the feedback, right? You need
Mhm.
to survey your people. You need to get feedback. You need to, take action with what people are requesting. But the problem is a lot of these startups and smaller companies don't even have an audience that's giving them feedback. And
Right.
then it seems like the dichotomy of the conversation is once a company gets big enough, it's almost like they're too big to steer the ship based on customer
Mm.
feedback. Like,
Yeah.
I used to work for Ducati, the motorcycle company, and then Suzuki, the motorcycle company. And both of those companies were in the practice of like, they stopped listening to customers. They were like, we're going to build what we think is
Mm.
cool, and we're going to tell you why you need to buy it, which is
Yeah.
the opposite of what we're discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the innovations come out of listening, and that's something that's not really talked about, but it's something that I've truly seen with all of these examples is that some of the greatest innovations that disrupt markets, that change the game in an entire industry, actually come from deeply, deeply listening. And what I mean by listening is not necessarily just hearing someone so that you can respond, but by really trying to understand what it is they're saying with completely at first what seems like no agenda, really trying to just truly and deeply just full concentration on what it is that they're saying. And then after that point, then trying to bring it back to the business model. So there's a really great case study that I found, which is called Red Sea Global. They're an organization that's a hotel chain. They build and develop hotels in new areas. And traditionally, these are not organizations that listen to their local communities or their local stakeholders. They'll normally find a great area to build this new hotel, and they'll go in and build that hotel. But they wanted to do things differently. They wanted to do it in a more creative way. So they said, we're going to listen to all of the locals in this particular area, and we're going to listen to what they want, which is a very strange approach. Most development companies don't do this. And they ask the locals, what is it that you want? What is it that we can be partners with you on? And they ask for two very strange things that are going to seem completely not related to their business model at all, but you'll see how it actually created their competitive advantage later. They asked for two things. The first one was a banana farm. The locals said they wanted a banana farm in their local area. And the second thing is they said they wanted sailboats because they had a very traditional way of sailing that was unique to their culture, and they wanted sailboats. Now, most hotel companies, most major corporations would say, well, that's great, but that's not really what we do. We don't really do that kind of thing here. But they said, no, I'm going to deeply listen to both of these things and think about how that connects to my business model. And they found out that by purchasing acres of land around their hotels, they could have a very unique farm-to-table experience, which was a unique culinary experience, and it gave the locals their banana farm, while they also had world-class restaurants that were very unique to that particular area. They also did give the locals the sailboats and taught them to ride those sailboats, and now it's a very unique sailing experience. The people all around the world travel to this particular hotel so that they could have a very specific sailing experience that you can rarely get, but you can get at this hotel. So it became a unique differentiator for this hotel line that no other competitor had in the market, and it was because they deeply listened to their stakeholders. So sometimes when we're talking about innovation, it's not just about listening to our clients and our customers. Sometimes it's also about listening to our entire stakeholder community, our investors, the locals on the ground, the people that you work for, everyone in your supply chain. If you can deeply try to understand each and every one of their viewpoints, and then after you've truly understood that, then connect it back to the business model, that's sometimes the greatest source of innovation right there.
You touch on so many things, and there's so many parallels in life to things. I'm old. You can tell by the color of my beard. I'm not young, but
No.
I volunteer a lot with younger people, with college age and younger.
Mhm.
And I was floored when nobody would I'd send an email and nobody replies, right? Nobody replies to the email. I'm like, what's the matter with these kids, right? I send them an email, no one replies. And then finally, I have a whole gaggle of them together, and I'm like, I don't get it. I've been emailing you guys, no one emailed me back or replied. Bar none, none of them have ever opened their emails. They have an email account that they use to sign up for Discord and Instagram and the other tools, right? But they don't use the email. It doesn't even exist to them, which I thought, well, this is bizarre. It's bizarro world for me because, obviously at my age group, everything's an email. And then the other thing that caught me off guard, and it's happened twice, is our community here in Kansas just re-released the Tribune. We have a newspaper now, and they actually print it every Thursday. Our town freaked out. So many founder investors. I'm actually a founder investor. I get the stupid paper delivered to my house every Thursday. And the idea that it seems like we're going backwards to get something in print again, to look at the paper, is such a weird thought, but everyone's really excited about it. And then I had mentioned that to these younger people, and they said, well, yeah, everyone's excited to get mail. And I said, what do you mean everyone's excited to get mail? And they go, oh, I love it when I get a postcard or a letter I love getting mail. And I was like, but you're the guy that has the email that you don't read. You have Discord, you have all these other tools. What do you tell me? And they're like, oh, we didn't grow up getting bills in the mail like you do. So we don't hate, I hate the mail. I hate going to the mailbox. But these young people, they love going to the mail and getting them. If they get mail, they're excited. But so that makes me rethink things from an entrepreneur standpoint. It's like, what opportunities did I miss? I could go back to an old school postcard, lead magnet kind of process. It might actually work doing direct mail again. Who would ever think? But it could. And so it's just really strange. To your point, when you really listen to what people say, you just have to flush your brain out of all those established things and really try to process what's really being said. It's hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of my great mentors, Martin Lindstrom, he wrote a book called Small Data in comparison with big data that we all know about. And he would actually sit on people's couches and listen to them for 2 days straight to try to understand the customer, to try to understand the end consumer. And he would do this for, 60 families or 60 people to truly understand that particular cohort. rather than looking at a database full of 10,000 individuals and gaining, some information, certainly. He said the value of small data, or really listening, like you said, to your students or to the people that you're working with, deeply understanding them completely can sometimes give an even better picture than a large data set, but not really listening to those few individuals. So it's similar to what you were saying about, talking to some younger people, and the channel with which you need to communicate with them is different, right? You're not going to reach out to them on an email. Maybe you actually will go out and send a postcard to them if you really want to get their attention with something. But really listening deeply on that kind of conversational level is so important for deeply understanding your customer. I mean, Martin Lindstrom, he worked famously with Lego and helped them redesign some of their toys. Because he actually got on the ground with kids and understood what exactly it is that they want and what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy. And that is such a valuable data set, even sometimes more than a much larger data set with even more kids in it. So that listening aspect, even if you can only listen to, 5 people or 10 people, can sometimes be a really, really big differentiator in how you approach reaching out to people or approach sending your product to people.
Well, the big data is like the what, right? So if you think about big data, it tells us what happened, what did they do? But that small data thing that you're describing, that really gets into the heart of like the why and the how.
Yeah.
And if you think about these people like the Why Institute, or gosh, I feel bad because now I'm gapping on names. But it's the people that do all the assessments for how you're really wired. I can't remember the name of it now. Now I feel bad. He's a really nice guy. But those types of assessments, they don't just tell you what you do, but it really gets into the core being of why you do it the way you do, or why you're wired that way.
Providing that context for questions. Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of hits on the innovative culture a little bit, but in the notes that I have, it says that it's like creating the Silicon Valley startup mindset. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot, and that's because I do a lot of IT work. I was the training manager at Ducati, the training manager at Suzuki. I did a lot with SCORM and e-learning, and now we run an agency independently that does a lot of e-learning work. And like, I don't want to say he's a friend, but I've interviewed Rob Walling multiple times, with the stuff that he does. And so when you think about a Silicon Valley startup mindset, what runs through your head?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that mindset has based a lot of my work, having grown up in Silicon Valley and been there for such a long time, and coming from a long line of people who've been in Silicon Valley and seen it transform from what was once orchards and farmland into what is now Silicon Valley today. And I think a lot of that is what I kind of term moon missions, and kind of going back to the early days of the space race. A lot of that being in California as well, too, and a lot of the technology that created the boom of Silicon Valley being invented at that time, people were fighting for something that was bigger than themselves. And you see this with a lot of successful organizations, that they have a vision that every single employee shares, that they feel is existential, that's bigger than themselves, that this is not just about a paycheck, that if the competitor gives them a 10% increase in their paycheck, they're not just going to switch teams automatically, because it's not just about that. It's also about something that they can tell their kids they're doing and feel proud of. And so I call that a moon mission, where you're really fighting for something existential. Now, that can be a lot of different things. It could be, let's say, we're going to give, clean water to this community, or it could be that we're fighting to, create the next generation of this technology. It might be many different things to many different organizations, but it's something that's existential. And I truly believe that that's a foundational model for the Silicon Valley mindset, is bringing people together in that way. And there's this one kind of interesting example that I've used in my book as well, too. And I think a lot of people in the clean tech world may know it. It's called Interface. It's a very interesting company that went from being an incredibly dirty organization to one of the cleanest and most sustainable organizations in the United States. And it did that while being a public company. So even when it was on the public stock exchange, it transitioned and made this huge innovative leap. And you see people at this organization staying 30, 40 years, engineers straight out of MIT, Georgia Tech, coming and staying in this organization for over 40 years, which is not heard of today. People normally switch companies every 2 years. So the fact that they're staying there, they're creating more IP, they're really investing back in that organization is truly because of that moon mission that they've built at Interface. So that's one example, but I think that when we come back to what is foundational to it, it's thinking about what is the organization's moon mission. And for anyone who's listening, for the startups, for anyone who's entrepreneurial in any sense, or even entrepreneurial within a larger corporation, finding that moon mission that you don't just believe in, but that your entire team is going to fight for is really something that's a foundation for any successful venture.
Now, do you think that's getting harder to do over time, or do you think it's getting easier?
Well, I think that it's actually getting quite a bit easier, but again, we have to go back to listening. And what I mean by that is when we think about just that example that we talked about, which is the hotel development group that listened to the local community and said, hey, we're going to build sailboats and we're going to create a very unique experience. Everyone who works there really believes in that mission, right? And even if that wasn't something that they were interested in beforehand, once they come there, they're going to feel really good that this is something that they're doing that is really beautiful, that's really unique, that's not only supporting the local community, but that's really a great differentiator for the business as well, too. So you really have to tap into what's existing within that community. What is it that they already care about that's very deep? And then bridging that to what is going to be the mission for the organization itself. One of my mentors, she was the former chief sustainability officer for Disney. And she said that the great kind of mission that she created was actually surrounding diplomacy, in the sense that if she wanted to ban, single-use plastics across all Disney parks, which is no small feat, she had to be a diplomat. She had to think about what is important to this person who runs this section of my organization. What is important to this person who runs this section of my organization? After she became an expert diplomat with each and every one of these people, she could create a uniting mission. And so if you want to build a moon mission of your own within your own team, you first have to listen and become a great expert diplomat with each and every one of these people, understand what matters to them, and that's how you're able to create the foundation for what's going to be a really compelling vision for your team.
You've kind of bridged over this on a couple of answers now, and one of your topics is sustainable leadership, right? So how can sustainable leadership? So obviously, extreme listening, having people on your team that have buy into the same moon mission, all of that to me falls into the idea of servant leadership or sustainable leadership. How does a person appointed to the role, I'm trying to say this with as much diplomacy as possible, how does a person appointed to the role that might be lacking in some of these qualities, how do they, in today's marketplace, how do they get there?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about each of the people that I've studied and done research on for the book is that nearly everyone who entered these positions didn't know how they were going to get there by the end. Each and every one of these people set out this wild, audacious, risky goal and had no idea the stepping stones to get to that point. So every single one of these innovators, they found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, shall we say. They were really experimental. They took really big risks and they didn't know what they were doing quite at first. And so I think that's somewhat encouraging for the rest of us who want to set out to accomplish something big or audacious, is that these great people, these inspiring examples, even they at the beginning didn't quite know how they were going to get there. In retrospect, it becomes brilliant what it is that they did. At the beginning, they weren't sure how to do it. So for example, with Interface, Ray Anderson was the CEO. He had a very traditional business model. It was carpet manufacturing. What can be innovative or creative about that? It's one of the most traditional industries. They were a mid-sized stock on the Open Stock Exchange. And he read this book that completely inspired him. And he said, in the mid-90s, he said, we are going to become a regenerative business, meaning we're going to give back to nature more than we take. Now, carpets are made out of plastic. They transport everything with fossil fuels. They're not exactly what you would consider a sustainable business by any means. And he didn't know how he was going to accomplish that. But he ended up at the end creating IP that's now used in Gucci, in Adidas, all of these incredibly innovative IP around fabrics. He was the one who created it. But at first, he had no idea how he was going to do this. In fact, it took him 2 years just to convince his team that this was a worthy cause. He had to continually convince them, and it was only a small little win that convinced them for the rest of the engineering team to actually hop on board with that moon mission. So I think that's, I guess, a small answer to your question in the sense that a lot of these very inspiring examples, they really set out with this moon mission at first, and then slowly started to understand how they were going to take risks, how they were going to experiment. And then once they had some small success, then they realized the path that they were going to go on.
See, my personal journey of leadership is a lot less exciting. When I first got in, I was a very A-type, very driven worker. And so whatever job I had, I could be working in the warehouse, I could be on the sales team at the Honda store. Whatever I was doing, I was number one, period. I was going to outwork everybody. And I did. I was pretty good at it. I was full of energy, and I would do it. I didn't have good leadership from home. I didn't have good leadership from school. I didn't have good leadership at my first few jobs. And when I first got my leadership opportunities, one of them most notably was working nights at UPS loading trucks, which, by the way, I will go on record, one of my favorite jobs ever. It's like playing Tetris in real life. I love loading trucks. Thing is I held the load record in our state for years. Like, just the way it was. When they put me in charge of a team, I just beat on those poor guys. I had one poor guy sobbing in the back of the truck because I was like, let's go. And he's like, let me see you do it. I jump in and I would do it. And I go, if I did it, you can do it. Work harder, work faster. It wasn't leadership. It was, it's the difference between being a manager and being a leader. I was managing, but I was driving people off my team. Nobody wanted to work for me. And it took a decade of me being a really bad leader before I realized people hate me, and this isn't working, and this is not going to lead to long-term success. I would be successful in short spurts. Like if I took a new job, I would go in and clean it right up, but then nobody wanted to stay on the team, Now that transpired through a lot of hard training, reading, self work on myself, like the whole thing. And now I think I'm pretty exceptional in the space, to be honest with you. But it wasn't. So that's when I ask those questions, like, how does someone who's not naturally in that space get to that space? Because at these large corporate levels, you don't have 10 years to fail at it. You've got to get on board.
No, absolutely. And what you face is such a common challenge for a lot of promotion, because we promote based on achievement. We promote based on the number of sales or the excellence within that particular field. But then we're not actually promoting people based on management or leadership skills, right? We're promoting them based on excellence in their field and not necessarily those leadership skills. So this is a challenge that so many organizations that I consult with face. And it's really a key challenge that we think of. The leader has to think about not necessarily the task at hand at first. They have to think about what are the unique skills that each of my team members have, and how do they fit together as a puzzle to then accomplish the task at hand. And you as somebody who's excelled in that particular field, have your own way of doing things. You have your own ways that you understand how we're going to get there. And the way the team's going to do that is going to be a completely different route. And so that's what's always the tension when this kind of thing happens. And the way that you have to think about it is first kind of coaching those particular clients to say, hey, let's first understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of each of your team members. You need to deeply understand that. Maybe there's one person who's really good at the last minute, but cannot plan ahead, right? We all know those people as well, too. We have to think about what are all of the different strengths and weaknesses? How do each of these people work? What is the particular patterns that each of them have? Take the first, 2 weeks to 3 weeks to just understand that and really create a map and say, okay, this person's going to be good at this particular route because they really understand that they can just get up last minute and they can particularly, take that particular shipment here. Whereas this other person, they need a plan. They need a structure. Let me provide them with that structure. And you start to create this puzzle where each of these individuals fit into that very unique puzzle. And actually, this is fantastic. If different people have different strengths and weaknesses. That means you're more versatile as a team. When different problems arise, different people are going to rise to the challenge, right? And this is something that's fantastic for the business. But if you ask people to fit in a particular mold, or if that manager has really excelled in the past and they have their own mold, and you ask them to follow that complete mold, they may not excel at that. And so it's so important to coach other individuals and to really help individuals understand that the first thing that a manager or that any leader has to do is they first have to understand, what is my map in terms of the people that I'm working with? What are they good at? What are they not good at? And you have to see that from experience. You can't just necessarily ask them sometimes. Sometimes you actually have to do, 2 to 3 weeks on the job or maybe more than that to really understand, okay, this person really knows how to do this, whereas this person really can't do that, but they're good at this other capability as well.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's to me that the understanding the team is so important. We have I own a thing called the Power Sport Academy where we teach motorcycle dealerships how to increase their sales.
Mhm.
And one of the exercises is literally just like write down the name of all your people, their skill sets and their work styles, and then
Yeah.
figure out, if you've got 9 people on your team and they all have the same work style, that ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to, so if you have an opening, so the goal of the course is to help them staff up, but to staff
Yeah.
up and fill their spaces rather than their redundancies.
Mm.
And so it's
Yeah.
because that's a type of business where it's going to sound sad. I'm going to say it publicly on a podcast, but the people that run those businesses were generally enthusiasts that got into business. They're not
Mhm.
business people that got into a vertical.
Mhm.
And so they
Mhm.
don't have a lot of real actionable business training to run those dealerships. And so everything we
Yeah.
can do to help them is a big win.
When you were, kind of learning yourself about kind of transitioning from kind of being a high performer to that leadership aspect that you talked about learning more and then kind of changing yourself and how you approach things. What did you learn that kind of changed the game for you in that sense?
Well, I got married and I had some kids.
That's probably helpful.
Well, I think that is kind of where things started to really make a larger turn, and that is
Mhm.
basically just trying to leverage empathy and things like that.
Mhm.
Naturally, I'm not a
Mhm.
very empathetic person. I'm not a very which is weird. I have unbelievably deep feelings for people, like I do, but it's not expressed physically. Like, I just 'cause, I was raised in Philadelphia, and I'm just kinda like, "Hey, everybody's got a bad day. Pick yourself up. Let's go." Um, I don't understand the wallowing part. I don't understand people that have a bad day that becomes a bad 3 days that becomes a bad week. Like, I don't register with that. Um, so I had to become more flexible and more understanding and
Mhm.
more empathetic to the way that other people are wired. And then after that happened, I started to notice that the people I did that with had like super skills that I wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a young lady I hired when I worked at Suzuki. Nobody wanted me to hire her. Everybody said that I should hire a motorcycle enthusiast and teach them how computers work. And I said, that's
Mhm.
stupid. That's not how things work. We should hire an e-learning expert that's fully familiar with the software and computers, and we can teach her about motorcycles.
Mhm.
And I brought her in for the interview, and I can say it out loud because I say it to her face. She's crazy. She's as crazy as the day is long. She's super creative, super crazy, always wanting to put like subliminal messages in the trainings and stuff. Uh, it would be a training about a motorcycle, and there would be like a picture of a tiger in the background. And I'm like, "Is that a tiger?" She goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Why is there a tiger in the motorcycle training?" She goes, "It's a symbol of strength." I'm like, "Take it out." Um, so I had to micromanage that area of the craziness, but the skill set, the energy, the creativity that she brought to the training department that the training department didn't have before then, it allowed us to make content that the end user actually wanted to do rather
Mhm.
than content they had to do. Because I think, in the corporate space, if someone has to do the training, it never gets done on time or it never gets done at all.
Yeah.
So with her help, we were able to actually start making training that the technicians wanted to take. But it
Mm.
was, no one wanted to hire her. I had to talk the whole company into letting her come on staff. And then I had to vouch for her for like 3 months. I mean, every time she did something, everybody complained and said, "See, we told you got the wrong person." And I'm like, "You got to give her a chance. You got to get up to speed. You got to onboard people," and thank goodness it worked out in my favor, because it would have been a hard one to live down. But she really ended up being a star on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I've seen with a lot of organizations as well too. Sometimes these partnerships are very unlikely, but it's really about bridging all of these very diverse skills together in order to run a business effectively. Somebody's going to be completely different. They're going to come from a completely different, maybe educational background. Maybe they're from a different culture, and they have different skill sets and different perspectives than you. And if you're able to bridge two people together who have very different backgrounds and very different experiences and mindsets, that's where the real magic happens with what we call innovation and things like that. Because if you have a very diverse team with very diverse interests, you're able to approach a problem from multiple angles rather than just one perspective. So if you try to cast a particular business based on everyone having a similar interest or everyone having the same exact background, you're only going to be able to approach that problem from one direction. When you have multiple perspectives, very diverse interests, very diverse skill sets, suddenly you can attack that same problem from multiple different angles, and efficiency increases, and you can think about new ways of approaching the situation. And it really helps with creativity. This is why one of the reasons why there's so many studies on why diversity increases revenue within organizations, because when you have diverse mindsets, you're able to approach problems from so many different angles. So that's an incredible example to that story as well.
Yeah, it really worked out. And, just thinking about it, it's every time we've put a square peg in the round hole, it seems to have been to our benefit.
Hmm.
Um, but, the power sports industry, same as the marine industry, which I also work in, both of those industries are very kind of like, if someone were to say anything to you, like if they were going to classify it in like that weird way that people classify things, they would say, oh, it's the good old boys club. And it's really not, but it's the perception, right? We do it this way because we always did it that way. It's the way we've always done
The
it. It's the
particular
good old boys
mindset.
club,
Yeah.
the patriarchy or whatever you want to say. But yet the most successful businesses in marine, Kim Swears is like the Supergirl of the marine industry. But for every Kim Swears, there's 50 other CEOs running boat companies that are guys, right? And so it's one of those where if we can successfully put more square pegs in round holes in these spaces, I think we're going to do a better job of spreading our goods and services over wider demographics.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you've been extremely generous. You've answered almost all of my questions, and I haven't even asked you what you wanted to talk about yet.
Oh, no, this is definitely what I want to talk about. I love talking about cultural shifts and innovation.
Cool. Now, if somebody wants to get a hold of you or sees value in communicating with you or wants to hire you or whatever, what's the best way to get a hold of you or to find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm writing a book. It's called Innovative by Nature. And as I mentioned, it has over 60 case studies of successful innovators who've gone from a non-innovative mindset to completely doing a 360 to where they are today. And I think it's really interesting to go from a case study based approach, especially as business people, to just make sure what works, see what actually works and what failed. And so that's what really the book is about, is how to innovate. And it's 7 principles to innovation. And it's all about, how you can do that based on what other people have already done and failed and succeeded at. So you can, of course, look up the book. It's going to be on pre-order soon, hopefully in the next few months, which is called Innovative by Nature. I also do speaking, consulting, and workshops as well, too. You can go to my website, which is vanessathompson.com. If you like to listen to my podcast, where I bring all these innovators onto my podcast and we talk about practical strategies for business innovation, you can go to the Sustainability Experts podcast. The website is the-sustainability-experts.com. And if you want to just reach out to me, Vanessa Thompson on LinkedIn, always happy to collaborate with anyone.
That is so perfect. Vanessa, I'm going to be honest with you. I have done a lot of training in like leadership and lean startups and like Six Sigma and all that stuff. I feel like you and I could talk for 3 hours.
I agree.
So if it's all right with you, I may send an invitation through Noemi to bring you back for a follow-up. Maybe
That'd be
after the
great.
book is
I love
launched.
that. Yeah,
After the book
absolutely.
is
That'd be
launched. It'd
great.
awesome to talk about that. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I hope that our listeners and viewers did as well. Folks, this has been Vanessa Thompson. All the links are going to be in the description of the video and, of course, on the posts inside the Mañana No Mas podcast. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.